The moment Grace leaned into my passenger seat, closed the door with trembling hands and whispered, "Please, don't take me home yet," I realized this night had nothing to do with my past. It was about someone silently falling apart while everyone else believed she had everything under control. I had spent 2 years trying to forget my relationship with Rachel, but driving her best friend through the quiet streets of Charleston, South Carolina, I was about to discover that heartbreak sometimes leaves behind people who never deserve to carry its weight. If you believe kindness can change lives, that forgiveness is stronger than bitterness, and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories that remind us goodness still exists. My name is Joshua Bennett, and at 34, I had become an expert at keeping my emotions neatly folded away. I worked as an architect, loved old jazz records, and had convinced myself that some chapters of life were meant to stay closed forever. Rachel and I had ended things almost a year earlier. There had been no dramatic betrayal, no screaming matches, only dreams that slowly drifted in different directions until love quietly slipped through the cracks. After the breakup, I avoided every place where I might see her. The only exception came that autumn evening when an old college friend invited me to a charity fundraiser downtown. I almost stayed home, but something inside me whispered that hiding was no longer living. Rachel arrived with several friends, including Grace Sullivan. I had always known Grace as the cheerful one who remembered birthdays, volunteered at church food drives, and somehow made every room feel lighter. She smiled politely when our eyes met, though I noticed the brightness I remembered had faded. Throughout the evening, she laughed at conversations, but her smile disappeared every time she believed no one was watching. Near the end of the event, heavy rain covered the streets. Guests rushed toward the parking lot, only to discover several rideshare services had stopped because of flooding on nearby roads. Rachel had already left with coworkers, assuming Grace had another ride. Grace stood beneath the awning, hugging herself against the cold evening air. When I offered to drive her home, she hesitated before quietly accepting. For several miles, neither of us spoke. The windshield wipers moved back and forth while the city lights blurred across the wet pavement. Then, just as my navigation announced we were approaching her apartment, Grace gently asked me not to stop there. There was something in her voice that sounded less like a request and more like someone desperately trying not to drown. Instead of asking questions, I kept driving toward the waterfront park overlooking Charleston Harbor. The rain had softened into a gentle mist, and the empty parking lot overlooked calm water reflecting distant lights. Grace stared through the window for several minutes before finally admitting that she had lost her nursing job 3 weeks earlier after the hospital reduced staff. She hadn't told Rachel or anyone else because she was ashamed. Unable to afford rent, she had secretly packed her belongings that morning. The apartment I thought belonged to her was already empty. She had nowhere to go except her aging grandmother's small assisted living room, where overnight visitors weren't allowed. As she spoke, years of hidden exhaustion poured out. She confessed that she had spent months pretending everything was fine because she feared becoming someone people pitied. Her father had passed away years before. Her mother lived across the country struggling with medical problems, and every application she submitted seemed to disappear without a response. She wasn't asking me for money or miracles. She simply couldn't bear sitting alone that night, pretending to be strong one more hour. Listening to Grace, I recognized something painfully familiar. After my own breakup, I had isolated myself because admitting loneliness felt like failure. Maybe pain looks different from person to person, but silence always weighs the same. I remembered that my church partnered with a local community outreach center, helping families find temporary housing and employment resources. Early the next morning, I introduced Grace to the program director, a kind woman named Rebecca Collins. Within days, Grace was staying in a safe transitional apartment while volunteers connected her with hospitals looking for experienced nurses. I never solved her problems. I simply refused to let her face them alone. Weeks turned into months. Grace found a position at a children's rehabilitation clinic where her compassion quickly became legendary among patients and families. Watching her confidence slowly return felt like witnessing sunrise after an endless winter. She laughed more easily, stood taller, and no longer apologized for taking up space in the world. One Sunday after church, Rachel approached both of us. She admitted she had been so consumed with her own career that she never realized how much Grace had been struggling. There were tears, honest apologies, and the kind of forgiveness that doesn't erase the past but allows people to stop carrying it. Strangely, there was no bitterness left in my heart. Rachel and I were simply two people whose paths had separated, while Grace had become someone who reminded me that compassion often arrives disguised as inconvenience. Sofieska. You kan sluken, hakjo, we verbetfri situetu ace faint purace, bukated a rainy night you see us, the rainy night. She said the greatest gift I gave her wasn't transportation. It was the feeling that someone believed her life still mattered when she had almost forgotten it herself. Those words stayed with me long after the waves erased our footprints from the sand. Before this story comes to its close, I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment and tell us about a time when someone's unexpected kindness changed your life, or when you were able to be that person for someone else. Your story may become the encouragement another viewer needs today. Grace and I eventually built a friendship rooted not in romance or obligation, but in trust, gratitude, and shared hope. Life continued bringing challenges, but neither of us faced them believing we were completely alone again. Sometimes the most important destination isn't the place someone asks you to drive them. It's the moment you decide another person's burden is worth sharing for a little while. If this story touched your heart, please consider liking the video, sharing it with family and friends, subscribing to the channel, and letting us know your thoughts below. Your support helps more stories of hope, compassion, forgiveness, and second chances reach people who may need them most. Sometimes one act of kindness, offered at exactly the right moment, becomes the beginning of someone else's new life.